Thousands of people have died in the storm here recently. Thousands, not hundreds. I called a friend up in Pennsylvania and I said, Jack, how many people died in the storm down here?
It happened just 1 minute ago. News so unbelievable that it's sending shockwaves through the entire mountain men community. Eustace Conway, the man who built his life around self-reliance and nature, is once again in the spotlight. But this time, it's not about his wilderness skills. Officials investigating his Turtle Island preserve stumbled upon something inside his old barn that has everyone, from fans to federal agents, asking the same question. What did Eustace hide all these years? Witnesses describe a scene straight out of a mystery novel. Hidden chambers, sealed crates, and something that instantly made authorities call for backup. Stay tuned, because what's inside that barn could rewrite everything we thought we knew about the legendary mountain man. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications, because this story is only just beginning. For decades, Eustace Conway's barn stood quietly on the edge of Turtle Island Preserve, appearing to be nothing more than a simple structure made from hand-hewn logs and weathered wood. To anyone passing by, it was just another piece of his self-sustained paradise, a place where the mountain man stored tools, grain, and memories of a life lived off the grid. But those who've been close to Conway always sensed there was something more to it. The barn wasn't merely storage, it was sacred ground, a space Eustace guarded like a fortress. Locals often joked that he treated it more like a museum than a workshop, warning visitors never to go inside unless he personally gave permission. That secrecy made what happened next all the more unsettling. According to early reports, the discovery began with a simple safety inspection. After recent storms damaged parts of Turtle Island, county officials were dispatched to ensure the old structures were still safe. When they arrived at the barn, they found it locked with heavy iron latches, more than what's typically used for livestock or tools. After multiple attempts to contact Eustace, the team proceeded under supervision from local authorities to enter. Once inside, the atmosphere shifted immediately. The smell of aged pine and oil lingered in the air, but there was something else, something metallic, faintly chemical, and unnervingly sterile. Stacked along the walls were neatly labeled crates, each covered in dust and sealed with old wax. But it wasn't until one of the inspectors accidentally kicked a loose floorboard that the true secret revealed itself. Beneath the planks was a narrow wooden hatch, almost invisible from above. When pried open, it led to a staircase descending into the darkness. The investigators hesitated, shining their flashlights into the opening. What they saw sent chills down their spines: rows of shelves lined with glass jars, rusted instruments, and books wrapped in animal hide. Someone had been working down there, documenting something meticulously and intentionally hidden from sight. The team immediately contacted local law enforcement. When questioned later, one of the first responders reportedly said, "It didn't feel like we were in a barn anymore. It felt like stepping into someone's secret world." Authorities quickly cordoned off the area, ordering everyone to stay back while they examined the contents. That's when Eustace arrived. Witnesses claim he seemed neither shocked nor afraid, just disappointed. He reportedly muttered under his breath, "They weren't supposed to find this yet." For now, officials refuse to comment on the nature of what was found below the barn. But insiders say it's unlike anything they've ever seen connected to Eustace Conway. For a man who's dedicated his life to simplicity, this new layer of mystery hints at something far more complex and, perhaps, far more dangerous. When investigators descended into the darkness beneath Eustace Conway's barn, they expected to find old farming tools, maybe some forgotten antiques. Instead, what awaited them looked more like a private archive. an underground vault carefully arranged and preserved. The air was thick with dust and the faint scent of formaldehyde. Rows of shelves filled the small chamber, each holding dozens of glass jars. Inside the jars were things no one could easily explain: preserved animal organs, feathers, bones, and even strange botanical specimens that seemed to glow faintly under flashlight beams. Alongside them were hand-bound journals sealed in wax, each labeled with cryptic phrases like cycle study, reversion data, and Project Living Legacy. Investigators said it looked less like the work of a woodsman and more like that of a field scientist, someone obsessed with cataloging every fragment of the natural world. On an old wooden table sat several tools: scalpels, magnifying glasses, syringes, and what appeared to be handmade microscopes built from salvaged glass. Some of the metal instruments were decades old. Others appeared newly forged. Whoever had worked here had done so recently. Even stranger were the crates lined against the back wall. Some bore faded U.S. Forestry Service markings. Others had serial numbers beginning with Fed and BIO, suggesting they once belonged to a government project. One crate, when opened, contained reels of film, each labeled with handwritten notes in Eustace's distinct penmanship. One read, Cycle 19, Observations of Conscious Adaptation. Authorities refused to disclose what was on the tapes, but an anonymous insider claimed that what they saw shouldn't exist. The journals, according to early analysis, contained sketches of human anatomy intertwined with diagrams of animal nervous systems, suggesting a study into the parallels between man and beast. There were pages describing experiments in endurance, notes on how the body adapts to starvation, isolation, and cold exposure. Some entries were signed EC, dated as recently as 2019. Others bore no signature at all, as if written by someone else entirely. To make things more unsettling, one corner of the room contained an old chest filled with bones, some animal, but a few undeniably human. Whether they were archaeological finds or something more recent is still under investigation. When questioned, Eustace remained silent. Witnesses at the scene claim he stood at the top of the stairs, watching the investigators with an expression of calm defiance, muttering only one sentence before walking away. "They're not ready to see what I've seen." That line alone has sparked endless speculation. What did he mean by they? Who was he referring to? And most importantly, what kind of discovery could make a man like Eustace Conway, known for his honesty and integrity, risk everything to keep it hidden? Whatever the truth is, one thing is certain. The barn wasn't a storage place at all. It was a vault, and what it held inside might be the most shocking revelation of Eustace's life. By the next morning, Turtle Island Preserve looked less like a peaceful homestead and more like a secured investigation site. Yellow tape surrounded the barn, police vehicles lined the dirt road, and reporters gathered at the property's edge, desperate for answers. For the first time in years, Eustace Conway's sanctuary, his life's work, was swarming with people who didn't understand his world. Inside the barn, investigators meticulously cataloged everything found underground, each item logged and sealed as evidence. The atmosphere was tense. Local officers whispered that the entire scene felt like something out of a government operation, not a small-town inquiry. What baffled them most wasn't just what they found, it was why it was there. What was Eustace, a man who dedicated his life to simplicity and natural living, doing with items that looked like remnants of secret research? When Eustace finally stepped forward to speak, the crowd went silent. Calm and stoic, he didn't deny ownership of the materials. "Everything in that barn," he said, "was put there with intention." The earth hides truths we refuse to see. I only preserved them. That statement raised more questions than it answered. What truths was he talking about? Some reporters pressed him about the crates marked with government codes, but Eustace refused to elaborate. "Those markings," he said, "don't belong to me. They belong to history." Then, without another word, he walked away, leaving investigators stunned. In the hours that followed, several agencies reportedly joined the case, including environmental and historical preservation officials. According to leaks, preliminary findings suggested that some of the artifacts predated Eustace's ownership of the property, possibly going back decades. Could he have uncovered something while expanding his preserve and chosen to hide it instead of reporting it? His followers insist he was merely safeguarding discoveries the modern world would exploit or destroy. But skeptics argue that his behavior showed signs of secrecy bordering on paranoia. Friends described him as focused to the point of obsession in recent years, often spending nights in the barn long after dark. By midday, rumors exploded online, claims of biological experiments, ancient remains, and even classified relics buried beneath Turtle Island. None of it was confirmed, but one undeniable fact remained. The evidence taken from Eustace Conway's barn was now in federal custody. His peaceful image as the wise hermit of the Appalachian Mountains had been shattered. The man once celebrated for living in harmony with nature now stood at the center of a mystery that could rewrite his legacy. Yet through it all, Eustace showed no fear, only quiet conviction. To him, this was never a discovery. It was a revelation long overdue. To understand the shocking discovery beneath Eustace Conway's barn, investigators turned to his past, hoping to uncover what could drive a man devoted to simplicity to hide what looked like a secret laboratory. Born in 1961 in South Carolina, Eustace grew up in a strict academic household where knowledge was valued above all else. His mother was a teacher, and his father, a stern intellectual, pushed him to challenge convention. From an early age, Eustace displayed an unusual fascination with biology and the human condition. While other children played, he dissected small animals to understand how life worked. That curiosity followed him to Appalachian State University, where he studied environmental studies and anthropology. Professors recalled him as brilliant but unconventional, a student who questioned not only human progress, but the moral cost of it. He once wrote in a paper that civilization is the experiment, and nature is the control. It was a chilling statement that hinted at a lifelong obsession with testing human limits. After graduation, he embarked on extreme wilderness expeditions, living in caves and forests, testing his endurance against the elements. Friends said he kept detailed journals about how the human body and mind adapt under pressure. Notes eerily similar to those found in the barn. One of his early companions once recalled Eustace spending an entire winter isolated in the Blue Ridge Mountains with only a knife, saying it was for research. When the investigation team uncovered journals in the barn labeled cycle study and reversion data, it became clear that his experiments hadn't ended decades ago. They had evolved. The diagrams, written in his hand, compared modern anatomy with primitive survival adaptations, suggesting he was studying how to return humanity to a more primal state. Some even theorize he wasn't merely observing nature. He was trying to merge with it. To many, Eustace was a philosopher of the wilderness. But to others, these findings paint him as something far more complex. A man who may have blurred the line between science and survival. And if his past is any indication, what investigators found next would push that line beyond comprehension. When investigators returned to Eustace Conway's barn for a second sweep, They didn't expect to find anything beyond the preserved specimens and journals. But deep behind the stacks of old timber and weathered lumber, one officer noticed a wall panel that didn't quite match the rest. The wood grain ran opposite the others, and when lightly tapped, it produced a hollow echo. They pried it open, and what they found inside silenced the entire room. Hidden behind the panel was a sealed chamber, no bigger than a closet. Inside, lying on a wooden table under a sheet of canvas, was a skeletal figure. At first glance, it appeared human, but as forensic experts soon discovered, it wasn't. The proportions were wrong. The arms were longer, the fingers unnaturally thin, and the jawline narrower than any known human specimen. Even the bone density, when scanned, didn't match standard anatomy. The skeleton had been treated with an unknown preservation compound, one that prevented decay but left the bones with a faint metallic sheen. Some officers believed it was an elaborate hoax. Others weren't so sure. Next to the remains sat an open journal written in Eustace's unmistakable handwriting. The entry read, "Found at creek bed near the ridge. Movement before stillness. Structure beyond human pattern." The date? October 2020, less than 5 years ago. The implications were staggering. Was Eustace documenting a discovery or confessing to something he had created himself? A few investigators whispered that the skeletal structure resembled some of his anatomical sketches labeled adaptive reversion model. If true, it suggested Eustace had been experimenting with or preserving something that defied scientific classification. When questioned again, he gave no direct answers. He reportedly told one officer, "It's not what you think. It's not death. It's transition." Authorities immediately seized the remains and transferred them to a secure facility for study, but none have released details since. The FBI's sudden involvement only fueled rumors that what lay beneath Eustace's barn wasn't from this century or this species. For now, the official explanation remains pending verification. But those who saw the skeleton with their own eyes said the same thing. It wasn't human, and it wasn't ancient. It was something in between. News of the skeleton spread faster than any of the officials could contain it, and within days, the story had escaped into the public. Social media was flooded with speculation, amateur researchers dissecting every leaked photo, and conspiracy channels claiming the discovery proved that Eustace Conway had uncovered evidence of something otherworldly, or something deliberately buried by history. But amid the chaos, one thing became clear. People were taking sides. Supporters of Eustace rallied to his defense, calling him a misunderstood visionary. They argued that the remains were either a teaching model or part of an old anthropological study that Eustace had preserved out of scientific respect. Many pointed to his lifelong dedication to education and preservation as proof that he would never fabricate something for attention. But skeptics and investigators weren't convinced. To them, too many details didn't add up. The strange coded journals, the classified government markings, and the undeniable fact that the bones had never been registered or reported. Some even suggested that Eustace had stumbled upon evidence of an undiscovered species, or perhaps something intentionally hidden by authorities long ago. Through it all, Eustace remained silent, refusing interviews and avoiding public appearances. When he finally did respond, it wasn't through television or press. It was through a handwritten note nailed to the barn door. It read, "Nature is older than truth. What we fear, we bury. What we bury, the earth remembers." Those words only deepened the mystery, sparking a frenzy among those desperate to interpret his meaning. Was he admitting to finding something ancient, or warning the world about what lies beneath our own history? Meanwhile, federal vehicles continued to arrive at Turtle Island Preserve, removing crates and sealed containers under heavy guard. Officials maintained strict secrecy, declining to confirm whether the remains were human or otherwise. But locals whispered that Eustace's demeanor had changed. He stopped teaching classes, spent hours by the river alone, and told close friends that they're not ready for what's coming. Whatever he meant by that remains unknown. What's certain is that the quiet wilderness he once called home had become ground zero for one of the strangest investigations in recent memory. And if rumors about the journals were true, the skeleton might not have been the only secret buried beneath Turtle Island. As investigators continued digging beneath Eustace Conway's barn, what began as a simple excavation turned into something much larger. Beneath the foundation, teams uncovered a series of interconnected tunnels, narrow, hand-carved passages leading deeper into the earth. The walls were lined with timber supports and old lantern hooks, suggesting that whoever built them had spent years working underground. One tunnel extended nearly 200 feet before opening into a larger chamber. Inside were more artifacts: rusted metal cages, glass jars filled with murky liquid, and a massive wooden table covered in old maps and diagrams. The maps didn't just show Turtle Island. They traced deep into the Appalachian Range, marking spots labeled R1 through R7. No one could explain what the symbols meant, but everyone corresponded to remote wilderness areas known for strange local legends. The discovery reignited theories that Eustace had been part of something bigger than anyone realized. A private study, maybe even a covert environmental program dating back decades. One of the documents found in the tunnel bore an official stamp: Department of Interior, 1987. Yet when contacted, the department denied any record of such a file. When Eustace was confronted with the tunnel photos, he remained calm. "Nature keeps records too," he reportedly told an officer. "You just have to dig deep enough to find them." That cryptic statement has since fueled wild speculation online, with some claiming the tunnels were ancient burial chambers, while others believe Eustace expanded them himself to hide discoveries that defied explanation. Whatever the truth, the deeper investigators went, the more they realized this was no simple storage system. It was a constructed network, methodically planned, its design echoing the sketches in Eustace's journals. One agent described it as part mine, part museum, part message. Even more unsettling were the faint carvings on the tunnel walls, symbols resembling constellations, but arranged in patterns not seen in modern star maps. Experts are still analyzing them, but one investigator admitted that it looked more like coordinates than decoration. The search was eventually halted after reports of unstable ground, but not before a final chilling discovery. A second hidden entrance nearly half a mile away, camouflaged beneath fallen trees. It suggested the tunnels extended far beyond the barn, and perhaps connected to something still undiscovered. As darkness fell over Turtle Island, one investigator summed up the mood best. "It's not just what's under the barn that scares us. It's what might still be out there." Weeks passed, and the investigation around Eustace Conway's property reached a boiling point. Officials refused to comment, yet insiders began leaking fragments of what had been discovered in the tunnels. Among the artifacts taken from the site was a final leather-bound journal, written entirely in Eustace's hand and sealed in a metal box. When opened, the first page bore a single sentence: "If they find this, the cycle is already repeating." The following entries were filled with calculations, drawings of skeletal structures, and notes describing biological harmony between human form and environment. But what truly shocked investigators was a final section written in red ink, a confession of sorts. Eustace detailed how, decades earlier, he had unearthed remains near Turtle Island's riverbank that did not belong to any known species. He claimed the bones were part of a lineage that predated humanity, something neither beast nor man, but the balance in between. According to his notes, the remains emitted a faint bioluminescent residue, the same substance later found on the skeleton in his barn. He wrote that he kept the discovery hidden to prevent institutional erasure, fearing that once the government knew, the truth would vanish like all the others. The last entry, dated a few months before the investigation, read, "They're waking again beneath the ridge. The land remembers its makers." After that, Eustace vanished. He left Turtle Island without warning, his truck abandoned near the forest edge, tools still neatly arranged on his porch. To this day, his whereabouts remain unknown. Authorities closed the tunnels and seized the property, citing biological hazards, but no official report was ever released. Some say the site now glows faintly at night, a soft light rising from the soil where the barn once stood. Others believe Eustace found what he'd been searching for all his life, a connection between man and the natural world that no one else was meant to see. Whatever the truth, one thing is certain. What they found in Eustace Conway's barn will forever change the story of America's last mountain man, and perhaps the story of mankind itself.